I was willing to make that sacrifice for the struggle, and I will continue as long as I am alive. Jubilee South Africa has made an important contribution to the struggle for social justice, not only in South Africa, but across the continent of Africa. But while our emphasis is on debt and the cancellation of debt, we're also focusing on the question of reparations and the repayment to Africa, both for the damage that has been done financially, economically to Africa, but also the damage that has been done to the environment and the ecology of Africa. So we focus on both of those issues. Don't owe one day. Don't owe one day. We are the creditors. We are the creditors. Thank you. What is important about debt is that it is a new method of control. In the old days, you had colonial powers, you had the military, you had the law, and you could control the development of people and you could oppress them. You could use the colonial administration to control them and to oppress them. In our time, they no longer use that colonial process. Debt is now the method of control. And essentially it works in a very straightforward way. African countries, Asian countries, South American countries need development. And the Western countries will offer them loans in order to assist them to develop. But those loans end up by, instead of assisting the countries to benefit, the countries end up in the repayment of that debt. And in fact, they repay far more than was lent to them in the first place. Secondly, as a result of that financial control, they can actually dictate the policy to the developing countries by a process that's called an SAP, Structural Adjustment Program. The Western countries will lend to the developing country and say, now you have to adjust your structure. One of the things they do is to dictate that the developing country should rearrange or adjust its economy so that the economy is oriented towards export production rather than internal production. That means the people themselves are going to suffer while the developing countries have to export their goods and send it to the developed countries of the north. So the end product is that countries are now in a new kind of enslavement, not the old colonial enslavement using the colonial administration, but now through debt they are enslaved to the developed countries and can dictate their policy to them. So this is why, one, we challenge the notion of debt, but we also challenge the notion of debt as an instrument of control. We see it as a way of controlling countries in Africa, Asia, South America. So very often that debt is an unjust debt. It was a debt that was incurred without consulting the people in the country, and without benefiting the people in the country. So the debt becomes what we call an odious debt, a debt which should not be repaid. 1960 and post-1960, the struggle intensifies. When over 60 people are killed, most of them shot in the back at Sharpeville, 200 are wounded by bullets from the police and the military. Struggle takes a new level, which then moves further When the ANC announces and the PAC announces, we are willing to engage in armed struggle because we have to engage in armed resistance. We are dealing with an enemy that is so brutal and so ruthless that we have to resort to armed struggle ourselves. And that's what is announced around about 1961 after Sharpeville. So you have the period between 1960 and 1990, say, when the system collapses. In that struggle, I would say that 1958, when we begin seriously to challenge apartheid in sport, and when we begin to make the demand, if South Africa won't change, then South Africa must be isolated. Play the game the way the rest of the world plays the game, and if you don't, if you want to make your own rules, you're just going to have to go off and play your game in isolation. And of course, gradually between 58 and 68, the boycott in Mexico City at the Olympics there. 10 years of struggle, but in the process, we were reaching white South Africans, those who were committed to apartheid and those who were complicit in apartheid. They were not active in it, but they were very comfortable, as most white South Africans were. They now may try and deceive us about it, but they were very comfortable. Even when they were not actively supporting it, they were enjoying the benefits of apartheid. But when they saw the world turn against them in a global rejection, we said, you can go play in your own backyard, but we are not going to play with the rest of the world. The family of nations of the world said, we reject you. You are the skunk. Keep out of our community. And it penetrated white South Africans. And I sometimes think that the political historians underestimate the importance of that isolation. But we still have to ask, where are we now? How far have we come? And then you encounter a very interesting problem. The same compromise that the ANC made in the corporate world, it also made in sport. Because it said to white South Africa, don't worry, you can keep your structures. You want to change, we'll give you time, 1992, South Africa goes to Barcelona. But in Barcelona, the structures of sport were still the old apartheid structures. And in fact, this year, 2008, in Beijing, and they're asking, what went wrong, I'm saying, go back to when you negotiated the change. Instead of insisting on real change, you accepted superficial change. Nelson Mandela running around wearing a Springbok jersey at Loftus Versfeld was saying to white South Africa, don't worry guys, you are okay, you Springboks, don't worry, we'll leave you alone. That was a mistake. We should have said right then, from now on this sport is going to be democratic. And we're now going to demand a democratic structure. But the ANC was willing to make the compromises, perhaps just because they were so anxious to have power that they weren't going to fight about the details. Instead of, as you know, the devil is in the details. That's where you should be. And the failure was there. So the penalty we are paying in Beijing, and we'll pay it in 2010 as well. But the real question, just to return, to finish it off, is we made compromises in the beginning, and that was a mistake. Now we are paying for those compromises.